Hi, welcome to the Dan Bradbury podcast, where turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. In this podcast, I'll bring you resources, tips, interviews, and lots more to help to grow your business and make it less dependent on you. Hi, I'm Dan Bradbury.
And I am Topher Morrison.
And welcome to the Dan Bradbury podcast.
Indeed. Hi. So it's been a week since we spoke about ops and systems, and I went back and I rewatched the documentary that we talked about. What's going on in your life right now, my friend? How's life?
Life is good. Life is good. I'm just chilling, enjoying it's a little bit quieter at the moment. So I'm enjoying some time to reflect and some strategic planning.
And I would guess that strategic planning has something to do with your Success Mastermind coming up in September. And if it's not, it better be, my friend.
We've got a conversation after this podcast recording, Topher, as a reminder. So we need to dial in on some stuff. There's some stuff we got to talk about.
Always yes, we constant. Do, my friend. All right, well, let's jump into it right away. Let's talk about current news.
Yeah, so news of the week this week is they've finally come out with a new Fast Track 100 list. So for those that are not aware, the Sunday Times Fast Track 100 it's the UK's equivalent, Topher, of the Forbes fastest growing business list. Yes. So in the UK, it's the 100 privately held companies that have grown the quickest, and the criteria are you've got to have revenue in your first year. You've got to have at least 3 years worth of data, revenue of at least $250,000 in the base year of trading, and revenue of at least $5 million in the latest year. You've got to have 10 employees, and in the most recent year, you've got to have operating profits of over £500,000. So in other words, you can't just raise a load of money and spunk it up the wall and to drive massive growth. Just got a whole host of VCs backing it.
So we shouldn't be heckling anybody if they came in at 99 or 100. They're still doing pretty good in the baller status, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you look, so the 2022 list, because I believe it was paused for a couple of years with COVID.
Yeah, I was going to say the last one they had was like 2019, because I know you had one of your clients was on 2019, and then they just took off. Was it because of COVID?
Right. Yeah. So we've got a client who came 7th or 8th on the list in 2019, and the companies typically in the top 10 have more than doubled or even trebled in order to be able to grow. So if you assume that the base level of these companies is 7 figures or even 8-figure revenue, that is one hell of a lot of growth.
That's crazy. That's crazy insane. By the way, since you're talking about him, we should just call him the hero of the week and jump right into that one, right? Let's give him a plug. What's his name?
Yeah, so his name is Ricky Singh, and so Ricky is of Evergen Solar. In fact, he's been interviewed on this podcast previously.
I've interviewed him as well.
Oh, right, yeah, he's been on a couple of times, because one of the things, if you go back and Google it, obviously at the time of recording this, the job market's still pretty tight. And Ricky, one of the ways that he drove such significant growth is because the man is exceptional at recruiting. So Evergen Solar Installation Company, obviously hot with the energy prices. So everybody's looking for solar panels to be installed, but ultimately he needs to get sales reps out there on the road giving quotes, and then he needs to have the operational team go and fulfill it. And it wouldn't work if he didn't have really shit salespeople. And if you search the podcast feed for Ricky's name or Evergen Solar, I think the last podcast was called the secret to recruiting A players in the current economy or the current climate, because he's got some tricks of the trade. So go back and check out that episode.
By the way, can I share with you my impression of this guy? The one thing that blew me away, and I think this shows how strategic of a thing. By the way, the theme today is going to be about sales, right? So I understand what you were talking about sales, and I apologize if I regress into ops and systems or business strategy. But what really blew me away about him is when we were talking, like solar in the States is heavily regulated, and the government does in certain states, they make it even hard to even get solar installation because the utility companies have got such a hold on the politicians. They're creating laws that make it very almost de-incentivizing people to have solar. And so I asked him about the similar aspects in the UK. I said, like, are you guys highly regulated? And, when you decided to get into that business, did you give that some thought? I was thinking about this from a negative perspective, right? And here's what he said. He goes, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I got into the business, because it is so heavily regulated. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I knew the barrier to entry for competition would be much less if I was in an industry which was heavily regulated. And I just thought, this dude's playing at a level that I'm not playing at.
Yeah, he's a smart dude. And before I go to the recruiting, let's go to another point. Just occurred to me. I am currently weighing up an investment in a solar panel installation company in California, of all places, Topher, because of regulation. So it's a weird connection because the company is actually owned by my cousin. And the company's grown fast, but it's going to grow more quickly because apparently in San Diego or in the state of California, I'm not sure specifically which, they've now got regulations have come in place, which mean all new build residential apartments have to have solar panels.
They have to have solar panels, or do they have to have the hookups, the connections for available solar panels?
So I'm not at that stage of the due diligence yet, so I don't know,
Right.
but I believe it to be the former. I.e., they need the actual solar panels. It's kind of like, hey,
interesting,
because in the UK, and I imagine everywhere or in most places around the world, to get a property that's mortgageable, obviously there's building regulations. You've got to build it to a certain standard, fireproofing, all that kind of stuff. In a UK, a property isn't mortgageable unless it's got a kitchen, unless it's got a bathroom with that's plumbing, is mainstream plumbing, etc. And so I'm told, been led to believe that that's the regulations in California now. Is kind of for the future energy needs of the state. It's going to need solar panels.
Well, they're going to need something because they're going to be losing their power eventually from the dam, because the Hoover Dam's drying up so much that they're going to eventually be running out of some power there. I don't know anything about California solar other than one of my favorite talk shows is called, what the hell is it called? Real Time with Bill Maher on, I think it's on HBO. And for over a year now, he has been on this rant against the electric companies in California because he's installed solar panels, and it's been over a year and a half and he still doesn't have them working because of all of this political crap and all these hurdles that they have to get him to go through. So I'm excited to hear that maybe they're actually finally making some advances and not letting the utilities company tell them what to do. So yeah, cool.
So looping back, so yeah, I'll keep you posted. And there might be a lesson there from a sales point of view. It's rising tide raises all ships, right? So I'm not saying I'm going to make this investment, and yeah, please, for clarity, don't take this as investment advice. But it is interesting if you're going to go, okay, how can I get in an environment where sales are going to be strong? I think sometimes entrepreneurs think that it's all down to them, and the external marketplace plays a significant factor. And so it can be interesting to see where's the tide moving. I mean, if you want to talk back to discussed previously on the podcast, Elon Musk, that boy's been ahead of the game. Where was why is Tesla, the Tesla valuation beat the previous, the top 10 other automakers combined from a valuation perspective? Ultimately, he was ahead of the game, and they are all playing catch up now.
Dude, do you know, this is, well, I do know you know this because I sent you the video on YouTube, but we have to do an episode about this, talking about Elon Musk's valuation of his company and the price, the value per unit per car. Like right now, like I think Toyota, their value per car, based upon how many cars they have in the world and what their company is worth around 20,000. Each car, the corporate value reflection is about $20,000 a car. Tesla, based upon how many cars they have in the world and the valuation of their current company, places a value per car at, do you remember? I want to say it was 1.6 million. Does that sound right?
I think it might have been more than that, but it was definitely in the millions. Well,
That's
and it's
just
interesting, right?
insane.
Because you could say, well, that's unbelievable, amazingly how valuable Tesla is. But it made me think that the company itself is overvalued.
Way
Once
overvalued. Yeah.
again, this is not
Who knows?
investment advice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but the point for people to think about is how can you get in front of it, right? Like it's some classic marketer, I don't know, direct response, Gary Halbert, somebody like that said, if you
Yeah.
could only have one thing, like hypothetically, if you had a hamburger stand, Topher, if you owned a hamburger stand, what's the one thing that you would want to be able to drive your sales? And people, when they asked Gary Halbert this question, so one of the world's all-time great direct response copywriters, thought he was going to say a good headline, a compelling offer, right, or even a great product, and he went, nope. Do you know what the answer is?
I don't have a clue because I would say location, but I don't know. I don't
Nope.
have a clue.
Well,
This is why
you
I'm not him.
might tie to location. He said the number one thing I would want to drive revenue of my hamburger stand would be a starving crowd. Right, a starving crowd, right? So, and therefore, time this back to energy and solar panels, and then I'll loop it right back around to Ricky. You kind of go, if it becomes regulation for solar panels to be needed, or maybe even not, just the fact that the market awareness and people looking for renewable energy to lower their energy prices, but also be good for the environment. These are two massively on-trend things that have been around for a while, are growing in popularity, and probably will continue to do so for many years. You kind of go,
question.
that's going to be a growing market. Anyway, but coming back full loop, remember, as we said before, Topher, there are I believe there are six kind of key areas of business, and you've got to nail all of them. So that's why, even though this week we are talking about sales, that they all interlace. You can't grow the demand and drive sales if you haven't also simultaneously improved the supply. Otherwise, it becomes unsustainable. But on the demand side, one of the ways Ricky's great is hiring world-class salespeople. If you get true A player salespeople working for you, they're going to do a better job of converting your leads, and salespeople's job is to make you the owner money, to drive revenue. And Ricky has just got some really fun ways of doing that. So specifically, where he cracked the mastermind group up last time he was talking about this. He says, so at a weekend, I'm not going to try and do a Ricky impression because he's got a really strong Cockney accent and I can't really do that. But he was like, at a weekend, right? It doesn't sound anything like that. But
I was going to say, so far you're missing it 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So we're just moving on. He goes, I'm just bored. He goes, what do I want to do? He goes, I look around my house. I say, oh, there's curtains there. He goes, right, I'm going to ring up and a company and say, I need some new curtains. So in other words, he'll ring up companies to come round to quote him for anything he can think of, just for a laugh, just so he can see the salesperson come round and pitch him. And if they come round and they do a good job of pitching him the curtains, he will go, okay, I've heard your pitch. I'm not going to buy your curtains because I don't actually need them.
Offer you a job.
But I'll offer you a job. And
oh my God.
So Ricky basically says there's not a time when he's not asking to be pitched. And he goes, you just got to keep your eyes and ears open, because if you're out in the world in retail, if you meet somebody who's exceptionally good, he's always offering jobs. But when he's bored at home, he'll just think, okay, how can I get good salespeople in front of me? And one of his...
love that. By the way, you're going to have a ton of people after they listen to this podcast. There's going to be a ton of people calling up people to come in and quote their plumbing, their electricity, their drapes, their redesign of their kitchens. They're going to be calling up just to recruit salespeople now. That's brilliant.
Well, what's the quote? Half of success is just showing up. I mean, Topher, the bar's not that damn high. I mean, it's astonishing. I'm having some building work done at my house at the moment. And, the builder I use is because he did a great job last time in this outbuilding, this office kind of conversion that I did. But you just need to turn up on time and do vaguely what you said you were going to do. Be polite, be on time, and you can win the business. But how many people listening to this? You've called a company, you want to give them your money. You're already convinced. All they've got to do is call you and ask, and they still don't do it, right? Yeah. And weeks pass, and they don't even follow up with a lead. It is absolutely unbelievable. But
you're right.
If you want to lessen the dependence on you, the business owner, have truly motivated, self-motivated salespeople, right? It reminds me of Keith Cunningham. One of his quotes, which I really like, is when people ask him, "How do you motivate your team?" And Keith goes,
Yes, I
I,
don't.
"I employ them."
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I employ them. That's their motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, because A players, in terms of the top 15 to 20% of performers by salary bracket, are self-motivated. They are internally motivated, and they've got a high need to succeed. All right, you give them a target, they knock that thing out of the park. So the key is, how do you hire them in the first place? And Ricky would say you need to get deal flow. So one of his critical drivers, Topher, one of the things that he's always talking about, and I forget the number, but the metric he watches for is that he calls it bums on seats, or butts on seats. And what he means is people sat opposite him in his office for an interview.
Yeah.
Right? So he's kind of going, if I get enough flow of people, I will see, he's learned to see the gems, and he goes, great, and he offers them a job. Fundamentally,
that's so important. By the way, tell me, you have a great story. You have a great analogy of where people go wrong in hiring. You say something about, and it's the exact opposite of deal flow, which is most business owners are guilty of not having enough deal flow through applicants. And I love what you say. It's something about
now I've got
interviews. What is it?
Yeah, right. So here's how most people recruit. Full stop. I mean, we're talking about sales, but which, by the way, is typically a very high leverage activity if you've got the products and service, right? And leads are like just having more focus, energy on sales. That salesperson, if they're good, will produce an ROI, right? And that gross profit will drop to your bottom line. But how do most people do it who fail miserably is they get desperate in need. So they throw up a shitty job ad, right? Which they've just swiped from somewhere else. It doesn't, there's nothing specific about it. So because it's a shitty job ad, they get no leads. They get 3 leads, right? So they just invite them all to interview. One of them doesn't show up. One of them shows up drunk. So the third one gets the job. In other words, it's being the least shitty of a terrible bunch. And then they wake up in 12 months' time and they wonder why they've got cultural issues, why they've got people stealing or being off sick or, whatever else might be going on.
I think the reason why that's so funny is because it is like, they say that the funniest things are the truest things. And I guarantee you there are people listening or watching this podcast right now that have had that exact same thing happen, where they're just hiring simply because there was just nothing good out there and they only had one person show up. By the way, this kind of leads into, we went from news of the week straight into the hero of the week. We didn't even talk about our fail of the week, which is hilarious. And it's almost, you could almost say this is the opposite of like there's the Goldilocks, right? You have crappy salespeople, you have people that are so good at sales they shouldn't be selling, right? Like your Jimmy McFarland, is that his name, from Fire Festival, that are just overselling the crap. And then you have the Goldilocks, the perfect ones. The Ricky gets the Goldilocks one. But the fail of the week here, we should probably talk a little bit about that. Fail of the week is talk about overselling from a franchise perspective, which was Domino's Pizza is in the news about a big fail. What was their fail?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like selling, people talk about saying, it's like I could sell ice to Eskimos. Well, try selling pizza to Italians, right? So, the birthplace of pizza. So Domino's, which is an American-owned chain, attempted 5, 6, 7 years ago now, 2015, to set up a national franchisor in Italy. And
how
so
did they not see that coming?
Well, so they've struggled along sideways. I suspect, Topher, they thought that their systems were what made it work. I mean, let's be honest. Nobody's pretending like Domino's makes the best pizza. I think they even know
we're
it.
Close. Yeah, they know it. That's the part that boggles my mind. That they should have gone, wait a minute, we're going into Italy, the birthplace of pizza. They're going to have a standard.
I don't know, because to be fair, you could justify it, because you could just do the direct comparison to McDonald's, right? Nobody pretends McDonald's is the best hamburger, right? But yet they've made more money as a restaurant than any other restaurant in history, even though their real money is because they're franchisor and because of the real estate play. But the fact is that there's been more revenue driven through McDonald's restaurants than any other restaurant chain in the history of mankind. So,
okay, but let me ask you this. I'm going to push back on this one. How many McDonald's are there in Hamburg, Germany?
I don't know the answer to that question. Somebody should write in and comment and tell us after this podcast, I'm sure. And we're back to this point that there's many different parts of business, but you need more than one. You can't just be strong on one and say that'll carry it. So fundamentally, maybe Domino's do have the systems. I mean, they are
a brilliant system.
I believe actually they're the biggest chain, pizza chain in the world. If not, they're certainly the biggest in Europe. And but that by itself isn't enough to guarantee success, especially perhaps if your target market is a little bit more discerning as to the quality of your pizza. So their franchisor has filed for bankruptcy. So they signed a 10-year lease in 2015. And even though fast food chains have thrived partly because of COVID, because more of us got on apps, take away food, and yet this franchise chain has filed for bankruptcy. Fail of the week.
But also, I think this speaks to, since we're talking about sales, you're at the heart of selling, you are to find a problem and offer a solution, or find a need and fill it. And I think that's maybe where they went wrong. As great as they are on ops and systems, there wasn't a need for low quality, cheap pizza in Italy.
Yeah, that's fair. Actually, Einstein says the definition of genius is the ability to hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously. So you've got my brain thinking now. So to make you think, there's another book on this.
I don't think it was Einstein that said that, by the way.
But it's my podcast, so we're going to say it was. So, okay, somebody smart said genius was the ability to hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously. And there's a book called The Irresistible Offer, which basically says, can you come up with a one-sentence phrase that encapsulates the pain, the offer, to make it really compelling? And the poster child for this book was Domino's and their significant growth in the US, which was hot pizza in 20 minutes or it's free.
Yep. Yeah,
right?
30 minutes or less. Yeah.
30 minutes or less,
was it 20
right?
or 30? I don't remember now. Yeah, it might have been 20.
To a certain degree, who cares, right? Yeah. It was so it wasn't about quality pizza, it was about speed. Yeah. And they operationally made it efficient enough so that if you didn't get it in the time limit, let's say it was 30 minutes, then you got the pizza for free. And it significantly, so the pitch is that irresistible offer massively drove their growth, right? So that's the opposing thought, to say, well, actually, yeah, it was on operations, which made it scalable. However, a good idea in a different time or a different situation can be a terrible idea. So different context, switching to Italy, and all of a sudden, you've got a much more patient culture there. Like if you think about espresso and coffee and the nurturing and the enjoyment of coffee in that culture,
it's an event.
Exactly, it's a different world than in other cultures.
By the way, what you just said there is actually very relevant to the pizza thing, because as much as we sit here and armchair quarterback Domino's Pizza, I do remember, though, that in that article they talked about what was the nail in the coffin for Domino's was COVID, because they kind of were the pizza delivery place, right? Where other pizza places were events. They would go, they would sit down. But in COVID, when it got shut down, all of a sudden, there were all of these delicious, great pizza companies that switched to delivery systems.
Right.
And it wiped them out. So, I mean, certainly they had to have been in trouble, I would think, before that anyway. They couldn't have had really great profits as well. But what you were just talking about is, in the right event or when situations change, a good idea becomes a bad idea. They just couldn't compete, because if you're going to get your pizza delivered and you can get a really good one or a crap one from Domino's, you can pick the really good one.
Well, that's why it's not about COVID. It's an example in the world we live in. The rate of change is faster, so you have to be adaptable, and that's the advantage that all small businesses have over big national, multinational conglomerates. Right? We have the ability to change direction more quickly, because you could say we are more vulnerable, but the fact that we can adapt, we can be more nimble. So when the marketplace changes, we can take advantage of that.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Let's talk about the book of the week. Now, this is interesting because with regard to books, there are not a shortage of sales books out there, so it's difficult to pick the book of the week. It's a good thing that every 6 weeks we talk about sales, so you can still throw them in there. But what is your book of the week?
I mean, this is a classic. So when I was thinking for this week's episode, Topher, I wanted to say, what do I go back to again and again? And this was The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. So Chet, sadly, is no longer with us, but this book really was a masterpiece, and it's well worth revisiting. But my favorite specific, so there's loads of gems in this. And oh, by the way,
I haven't read this yet, by the way. I've not read
Toby, you'll love it because it felt very practical, very actionable for business owners. But I feel like we've had a few weeks of podcasts and we've not mentioned my favorite human being on the planet or business person on the planet.
Would that be Warren Buffett?
It would be Warren Buffett. It's a bit of a tentative Warren Buffett connection, but
by the way, don't say we've gone weeks without mentioning him. You went week without mentioning him. 1 week. Last episode you didn't mention him. He has been coming up every single thing when I've co-hosted with you. So don't give yourself.
And you know what? And I regret that week. I regret that week.
So, big fail on your part, buddy.
My confession
That's
is,
the one episode Warren Buffett's going to listen to, by the way.
My confession is I didn't even think about how to somehow strong arm him in, somehow fit him in, shoehorn him in, but I couldn't figure it out, so it didn't happen. Anyway, in fact, he nearly made the quote of the week on that week, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I found a better quote. So, and this is a tentative connection.
By the way, I'm surprised we don't just have Warren Buffett's quote of the week instead of quote of the week.
I'd be fine with that. You know, they say you should make content that you want to consume. I'd listen to that podcast. So
we should just have a podcast called the Warren Buffett Quote of the Week, and it's a 5-second podcast, and it's just one quote.
It's good.
Way easier to produce.
You know what, Toby? One of these days you should. I mean, they only get the back shot on the video of some of my books in this side, but like the other walls there, other rooms in my house, I need to total up the number of books. But the interesting mix would be, well, how many books do I have? How many? And it'll be thousands. So how many books do I have? Yeah. And what proportion of those books are connected to Warren Buffett in some way? I think it's quite a high proportion.
Yeah, it's not just a shelf, put it that way. It's definitely more than one shelf. Not to mention the votive candles that you have with his face on it and the shrine that you've created.
Indeed. I mean, my parents are still alive, but Warren, if you're listening, I am up for adoption. Anyway, I feel like we're getting off track here, especially as that was just a tee up for a ridiculously tentative connection. So, I was a big fan of this book before I went back and reread it and saw this point that Chet Holmes, how he got his start as an employee and when he really got magnified and went up in the corporate world before he went out on his own and wrote this book, was he worked for Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner.
Really? Interesting. Yeah. I didn't know
that. And so in the start of this book, there's a whole host of different sections to this book, but like there are, how many chapters are there? There are only 12 different chapters, and the idea was like one a month. But the first chapter is time management.
For a speed reader like you, one chapter a month would drive you insane.
Oh yeah, no, right. That's one. I can't even do one chapter now. One chapter a minute. Yeah. So the time management secrets of billionaires was the first chapter, and it was really about what he learned from Charlie Munger, i.e., how do you become maximally productive? But that wasn't even my favorite takeaway. So here's my favorite takeaway from this book, which I've used so many times. And always gets a laugh when I tell it. So it's the chapter on hiring superstars, right? Hiring superstars. So Chet talks in great detail, and it's very granular but practical. It's like, what's the ad that you put out for the superstars, right? And so the ad, I mean, it's only a paragraph long, so I'll read it. So his ad to generate salespeople will be superstars only, 50,000 to 300,000. Don't even call unless you're an overachiever and can prove it. Come and build an empire with our fine progressive company. We're in the blah, blah, blah industry. We don't hire backgrounds. We hire top producers. If you're an average star, you can make 50K. If you're a superstar, you can make 300K per young or old. If you've got the stuff, contact us on X,
That's
right?
a great ad.
So simplistic ad to the point, trying to get this particular profile, self-motivated, self-driven thing. But then he's clear about the script for what happens at their first point of contact. So you place the ad, and the idea is these salespeople ring you up. And he says, if you're trying to get superstars, they need to handle rejection, right? If you're going to be a huge, so the first thing you need to do is to reject them.
Yeah, see how they handle it.
So say it'd say when the person comes on the phone and says, "Hi, blah blah blah, I'm Topher," you go, "Great, you've read the ad. It says don't even apply unless you think you're the best. So tell me, why should we interview you?"
Nice.
And he says normal, and he gave 2 examples in the book. He goes, the average person goes, "Well, I want to understand a little bit more about your company," and then he says you cut that off and say, "Well, we haven't got the time for that. Why should we interview you?" And you get people that are just waffly and shitty. And the bit that cracks me up is if you say, "Hey, why should we interview you?" A players will immediately go into selling. They'll immediately pitch you.
Yeah.
And then he says, no matter what they say or how good they are, you always reject them again. Right? So no matter how good their pitches, you go, "That sounds good, but I'm sorry, Topher, I'm not really hearing top producer." And he says his favorite response he ever heard when he did that was the person gives the pitch and he goes, I'm sorry, I'm not really hearing top producer. And the person just goes, "What? Are you deaf?" Right? Like maybe you're deaf. The point being, he says that you've got to have a strong ego.
Yeah.
Right. So there's just loads of little nuggets like this where you go, and I've used that script so many times, Topher. So the ad, what profile you're looking for, and here's the script. So
That's
The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Check it out. It's a great book, well worthy of rereading.
I will. By the way, that ties right back to what you were talking about with Ricky Singh. He hires great salespeople as well. I'll share with you, now that we're talking about great interview techniques, I'll share with you my little one that I'm quite proud of. You want to hear my interview technique?
Yeah, let's do it.
So here's the question that I always ask. Whenever, and I prefer to do group interviews so my whole staff can see them. But what we'll do is I always start off the interview with this question. I say, here at Personify, we like to enjoy ourselves and have a good time while we're at work. We work hard, but we want to have fun, and we want to make sure that every day we can go home saying we enjoyed ourselves. So having said that, tell me a joke. And then I just shut up. And I don't even care what the joke is, right? Like it could literally be the stupidest knock-knock joke on the planet. It could be a stupid pun. But I just sit there and I say, tell me a joke. And then I pause because there's probably not too many things more stress-inducing than putting somebody on the spot in an interview to come up with a joke, right? Because their brain's going through all of these different jokes that they've heard. Most people don't think they can tell a joke. And if they remember a joke, it's a dirty joke. Do I risk it? And do I tell a dirty joke at an interview, right? And I'm not listening for anything in terms of their sense of humor. I'm just evaluating how they handle pressure. And I found that the people who sit there and go, I don't know, I just can't think of one. I let them off the hook and I immediately don't want to hire them. Right? I might go through another 3 minutes of an interview, but if they can't tell me a joke, that tells me they can't think on their feet. And I want somebody who can think on their feet and maybe take a little bit of risk. So that's
and as if to prove, I really like that, by the way, because as if to prove the point, I paid no attention to you for the last 30 seconds because I was cycling through jokes in my head, just in case you turned around and said, "Tell me a joke." So there you go.
There we go. All right, let's go to the quote of the week, my friend. You've got a nice one here coming up from Roy Bartel.
Love this quote. Most people think selling is the same as talking, but the most effective salespeople know listening is the most important part of the job.
Nice. So true. Yeah.
Yeah. Think about that.
Best salespeople are the best listeners, no question. By the way, I think that goes back to, and interestingly enough, that one of the, like if you've taken these profile personality tests, one of the things that determines a high caliber salesperson is they have a high level of empathy, which means they care about the person. They want to listen to them. They're not just rattling off memorized scripts. They actually are listening to the people to hear their needs and their concerns.
Well, yeah, I mean, two points there, Topher. I mean, Gabriella on the DB team is exceptional at that. So again, going back to the Chet Holmes, got to have a strong ego to be able to handle rejection, but also got to be empathetic. And that lady is an absolute master of questions.
Yeah,
and the second part is, how can you leverage questions in your sales process? So you can do this via automated ways. If the guys go to danbradbury.com, check out some of our scorecards, the business profit maximization scorecard. Ultimately, it's a series of questions that allows us to gather information about potential clients. So we give them feedback as to where they can improve their business, but it allows us to understand them better, so we can see if it's a good fit and how best we can support them with their needs. Makes the whole selling process more effective.
Which, by the way, your business profit maximization scorecard is getting a facelift and an upgrade, and you're about to come up with your profit maximization scorecard 2.0. So by the time this podcast is published, it very well may even be live. So
correct. I mean, there is so there's the BPM scorecard 1.0, which was great, but we found a way to improve it and make it even better. I was just in a meeting about this earlier today. It's looking great and sexy as hell. And also what is now done, and it will definitely be live by the time this podcast comes out, is there is now a new financial literacy scorecard. So business finance. So score yourself in the different areas of business finance, learn where you're strong, where you're weak, and more importantly, how to improve it, get a customer report. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Absolutely. All right, my friend, take us out of here. This was a great show. I'm inspired. I can't wait to read Chet Holmes' book. I will definitely be doing that because I'm an avid reader.
That's it. I mean, ultimately, remember, Topher, if you want a better business, you need to become a better business owner. See you next time.
I'm into that. See you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. 3 things you need to do now. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss an episode. Also, get on over to Amazon to get a copy of my latest book, Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity, 9.5 Steps to Improving Your Profits and Cash Flow. Also, join our Facebook group, the Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity community, to connect with other business owners.